right. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone's joining us today. We just opened up the waiting room. We're going to give everyone about 15 or 20 seconds to arrive, and then we'll dive right into today's episode of Turbocharge Tomorrow. Shuchi, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's pretty hot here today, and we got the heat warning, so it's going to extend for like next couple of days. I don't know why, but it always happens on the weekends, and then your weekends are pretty much just stuck indoors. So that's the part I'm not very happy about. But yeah, looking forward to our discussion today.
Awesome. You got a heat wave in LA. I got a little bit cooler weather in Chicago today, upper 60s. So we're in full fall mode. Well,
Wow.
let's dive in. I know you and I have been prepping. We've got a lot to cover. I'm very excited. I want to welcome everyone joining us today to Turbocharge Tomorrow. We do fireside chats with innovators and visionaries around technology and software development. Today, I could be more excited to welcome Shuchi Mishra, a deeply seasoned data, AI, and analytics expert. You have amazing experience at Capital One, SADA, Nordstrom, Sony, and more. And I know you've got a very big week coming up next week. You will be joining Home Depot as the next director of search and recommendation, making sure I got that right, where you'll be leading and enabling generative AI initiatives specifically around transformation and ongoing transformation there of the customer experience. So congratulations on your new role.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that warm introduction. I'm super excited to be here today, and I want to give a big thank you to everyone in the live audience for joining us. AI is such an exciting space, and I can't wait to share insights and strategies. So let's get started.
Awesome. Okay. What I'm very excited about, as you and I prepped, is it's not theory today, especially with your experience, especially inside larger organizations, is how to take that technology and implement it to meaningfully move forward initiatives, business initiatives, and to push your teams forward. So let's start here. Analysis paralysis, especially we always talk about, on Turbocharge Tomorrow, the speed at which, especially the last 12 to 16 months have gone. So when you're inside large organizations who can tend to have a fair amount of red tape and a lot of approvals, how do you overcome analysis paralysis or red tape in order to move, especially data initiatives forward? Let's start there.
Yeah. So one of the biggest reasons organizations get stuck in analysis paralysis with Gen AI adoption is this urge to gather every possible use case before taking any action. I mean, sure, identifying potential applications is important, but it can quickly become a distraction. It's like reading every single review before picking a restaurant. By the time you decide, you're too hungry to care.
Yeah.
Um, Another reason is the never ending cycle of meetings focused on general AI topics like opportunities, constraint, bias, ethics, infrastructure, policy, talent. While these discussions are valuable, they often lead to more questions than answers,
Yeah.
trap everyone in the loop of uncertainty.
Yeah.
What happens is that organizations find themselves in a tricky spot. They need answers to get funding, but they can't get those answers until they start a project. So it's a catch 22 situation.
Yeah.
Understanding the impact, cost, infrastructure changes, policy implications, and required skills are all interconnected. And
Yeah.
this can really slow things down. The reality is, many of these questions can only be answered by jumping in and executing.
Yeah. And how have you seen that work really well? Is it about developing a framework or setting aside innovation dollars or not having to get that approval to prove out that business case?
Yeah. So the key to moving from endless deliberation to real action is to stop trying to create the perfect plan, period. Instead, we need to embrace an iterative approach. Think of your AI strategy as a long term journey, one that starts with big vision, but is built step by step with small, manageable actions. So, first, paint a clear picture of what you want your organization to look like as an AI driven company. Focus on 5 areas: capabilities, what specific business problems do you want AI to solve? Infrastructure, do you have the right technology to securely handle your data and scale your solutions? Talent, are you investing in the right people to drive your AI initiatives? Governance, are there metrics and oversight to in place to manage risk and track success? And
Hmm.
then finally, tools. What third party resources can you leverage to speed up your AI development? Once you have that big vision, don't get stuck trying to figure out every detail upfront. However, to get the ball rolling, your leadership and stakeholders still needs to be on board. So approach them with answers to 3 simple questions. Why now? So what? How? Now let's talk about these questions a bit. Why now? AI is advancing incredibly fast. Models like GPT-4 are quickly picking up. It's not just a minor upgrade, it's a huge leap forward. Taking action now allows you to get ahead before your competitors do. And waiting means potentially missing out on game changing opportunities. So what? If you don't act now, you risk falling behind. It's as simple as that. The benefits are real, measurable, and critical for staying competitive. How? Start with a small pilot project that fits into your overall vision. This lets you test the waters, show quick wins, and build confidence within your team. As you go, you can refine and expand your AI strategy. The idea is to start maturing your organization in these 5 areas one step at a time. The goal is to build momentum. Small, successful projects lay the foundation for bigger, more impactful initiatives.
Yeah. No, I love the framework. I think it makes a ton of sense. It's laid out simply. Where do you see inside large organizations that framework breaks down? Or is there one constraint in particular around the why now, the so what, or the how that you often see trips up organizations or trips up executives?
Yeah, what I mentioned earlier was it's the how part. Starting small. People do have that intention, but when it comes to the execution, somehow it ends up becoming boiling the ocean kind of projects,
Yeah.
and that's where it becomes a challenge.
Why is that? Is it just ambition, or you feel like, generative AI in particular is so much possibility and impact that you want to see all that impact right away? Or why do we still try and boil that ocean when we know it's probably going to fail?
Yeah, I would say like all of the above. Like, it's definitely the people, like, when there are too many people with different vested interests, the ambition could be somewhat misaligned. Like, people want to get different things out of it. It's also like it can solve so many problems. So, the lack of alignment in terms of like what should be that first pilot project we should be doing to develop those capabilities. And that is why I
Yeah.
started that very first statement that don't get stuck on trying to
Yeah.
gather endless use cases. It's
Yeah.
going to be that rabbit hole.
Is it safe to say that you ascribe to ship early and ship often? Or still to this day, the Google book design sprints, I continue to see that at the top of New York Times bestsellers list. So obviously, that's really resonating with people and resonates with what you're saying, right? If we're continuing to seek out that sort of guidance, that framework, we're still really struggling with that.
100%. I agree.
Amazing. Okay, so let's keep moving. How do you think, in particular, this framework that you just laid out addresses some of those questions inside an organization, both strategic and actionable? How do you start to put that framework into play?
Yeah. So let's talk about how this framework really makes a difference. The whole idea here is to get your organization maturing across 5 critical areas: capabilities, infrastructure, talent, governance, and tool, all at once. This is the big vision. But just like any transformation, it's going to take time, and that's okay. You're going to get there by doing, not by endlessly talking about AI concepts or collecting use cases. And the best way to get started, kick things small with small manageable projects. You'll ask for funding to get this project rolling, and it will help you start moving the needle in each of these five areas. Now if you ask me like what's the outcome, well,
Mhm.
start with, you're mitigating risk by starting small. You're keeping risk low and manageable. You don't need to stress about guessing the ROI upfront.
Yep.
Second, you're measuring success. It's all about small wins. These steady incremental success will help you grow across all dimensions. And then finally, it aligns with your company goals. Who knows, your pilot project might even align with like a high profile initiative already in the works at your company, giving it extra backing. So this approach of will make sure that your AI initiatives aren't just strategic, but also actionable. And at the end of the day, it's about moving forward and seeing real results.
I love it. Now, when you think about it, so you're assembling the team, you're addressing those five functions of the framework. Do you like to choose an application inside the organization that is, really not performing well or underperforming, and start small and try and say, okay, we can chip away at that and make this significantly better as we iterate? Or do you like to take something that's working relatively well, but push it kind of to that next level just to prove the use case of the technology inside the organization?
It could be either of those, if you ask my opinion, and again, it might vary from people to people. But what I would rather focus on is a low hanging fruit. I'm not going after something that might need like years of like work. Because the idea here you have to keep in mind is about proving that this model can work, and also doing some kind of like SWOT analysis on what do we need to
Yeah.
become an AI empowered company, especially with Gen AI, and what do we need to develop to support that kind of infrastructure. So learning from your experience and working on a low hanging fruit would be an ideal use case. However, that being said, if you can focus on something that's a critical business problem and a low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
you know, the best situation, I want to say.
What I'm hearing you really continue to say and iterate, and I've heard this throughout my career, is you got to love the process, right? When Domino's said we're going to become a technology company, not a pizza company, that wasn't just lip service, right? That was a significant investment in people, in technology, and those investments resulted in material changes in the organization, in the stock price, and the customer experience. So for a lot of leaders, you have to say we are going to become an AI enabled organization,
Mhm.
and that changes your mindset, right? Versus what is the tangible outcome I can immediately get out of this technology or process, right?
Yep. Yep.
It
Totally.
feels, simple, and especially sitting here in 2024. But again, like so many organizations, I think, still struggle with that mindset or even saying those words out loud that we want to become an AI enabled organization. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, all the time. Like, open your LinkedIn and you'll see like blogs and blogs of articles about here are 100 links to learn about Gen AI, and here are 200 links to learn about Gen AI. And it's funny that there's a very popular sort of like influencer on Gen AI topics, and there was a comment like down below that I read yesterday, and the person was like, I'm so sorry, but I don't have time to read 80 links. Can
Yeah.
you like tell me what exactly do I need to read to
Yeah.
sort of like just go from there?
Yeah.
Response from this person was like, well, I'm just giving you as a reference and you can pick and choose. But how can somebody pick and choose if you know nothing about the topic, or if you know very little about the topic? So it comes with experience, it comes with doing. You're going to fail, no doubt about that. But as long as you're making those projects small, you're not going to fail like massively. And that is why that
Yeah.
insist on like starting small.
Yeah. I also think like one of the things we'd be remiss in not talking about is mindset and fear and change, right? At the very practical level, if you are a technology leader inside a large organization and this is your vision, if there's a debate on the front lines on whether or not this is going to replace or enable employees, and there's a large contingency that feels like it's going to replace and then create resistance to becoming that organization, all the best frameworks in the world are going to kind of fall down. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
100%. You're spot on.
And so, really, it is about an alignment on the mindsets inside the organization and the deep seated beliefs around the technology and where this technology is going to go. And it's really incumbent upon technology leaders to have those conversations
Yeah.
on the immediate teams that are executing, but also, you know, with the organization at large.
Hmm. Hmm.
Amazing. So that's all well and good, but we also know we're going to run into cost challenges. We're going to run into infrastructure challenges. We're going to run into legacy application challenges when we try and implement this. So, which strategies do you like to implement when trying to overcome some of the necessary infrastructure? Let's start with infrastructure versus cost, some of the infrastructure challenges.
Yeah, I'll just bundle your response together because they are sort of like interrelated.
Sure.
Um, and I'll give you three strategies that come to my mind. And the first one, it sounds like a broken record, but it's point of time, but start small. Instead of jumping straight into massive AI projects, start with something small. A pilot project lets you test things out, get a sense of the cost, and figure out what infrastructure you'll need without biting off more than you can chew. It gives you room to learn and make tweaks before you scale up.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing is define capabilities and boundaries. And now, when talk about capabilities, I'm talking about different areas like text based capabilities, things like semantic search, information extraction, or text generation, visual capabilities like image recognition, image to text conversion, video analysis, audio capabilities like speech recognition, audio analysis, voice synthesis. And instead of trying everything at once, stick with one or two capabilities that directly address your problem. So let's say, hypothetically, you're running an e-commerce business and your customers are leaving because they are not getting the right recommendation. You could start by using semantic search to understand their search intent better, or information extraction to analyze their feedback and improve the recommendation engine. The idea is to stay focused, choose the right AI capabilities that will
Yeah.
solve your business problem, and build from there. And then finally, customize your infrastructure. When it comes to infrastructure, it's important to remember that bigger isn't always better. You could go all in and train a huge model that
Yeah.
tackles multiple use cases, but that's costly and time consuming. Instead, why not use a smaller model that's designed specifically for your needs? So, just to wrap it up, like start small, focus on the key problems you're trying to solve, and build the infrastructure that works best for your specific use case. At the end of the day, it's all about working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. I love that. And I want to drill in a little further because I like that use case a lot. So, inside, let's say, a large retailer, that e commerce team, how do you like to approach it as we make this AI shift? Do you like to have like the AI SWAT team that has a deep level of expertise coming in to, say, an e-com team and saying, hey, we're going to partner together to achieve a business outcome? Or do you like to say, we want to ensure there's a pervasive amount of at least minimal generative AI or LLM knowledge throughout some of these teams, and that they're raising their hand and saying, hey, I think there's an opportunity here. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so, you know, the way I would approach it is start by looking at the pain points, so you have to identify which section of your business is suffering the most, and the traditional cookie cutter solutions are just not fixing the problem. You already have, now assuming you already have like your data science team and you know some kind of other teams like machine learning engineers, data engineers who are equipped and knowledgeable enough to sort of like with the whole life cycle of model management, um, try to set up a small team to just do a small proof of concept. and see whether or not that solutioning, and now given it's a proof of concept, is really giving you a better lift, model lift, compared to a traditional cookie cutter solution. Now, testing these kind of models, and especially with a POC kind of solution, is a whole different discussion. And if I go down that, we might need a episode 2 for this. So hold it off for now. But you got to somehow loop in the human feedback
Yeah,
instead of the A/B testing part, because that will be probably not a POC at that point of time. The experts, to really get their feedback and say that yes, these Gen AI solutions are giving us better, semantic search
yeah.
input than the traditional solutions like Lucid Chart, or Solar, or like any other kind of elastic search kind of solution.
I love that. So it sounds like you're a big proponent of kind of building those cross-functional hybrid teams, taking the folks with deep domain expertise and working alongside maybe the folks that have day-to-day ownership over that. Do you ever run into hurdles that feels like a little bit of reorg, or at least a temporary reorg, to inject a new technology into existing process, getting other leaders on board? Do you ever see resistance into that, or a disagreement on prioritizations?
Of course, all the time. That's part of the job. There is definitely, you have vested a lot of time and energy in establishing the current solutions, and depending on who you ask, you may get a very different perspective on whether or not it's working.
Yeah,
Uh, But one thing that's constant and that's true is change.
yeah.
Uh, as businesses are evolving, you need to maintain that competitive advantage. Today, your current solution might be the most effective solution for the problems you're facing, but you got to also realize how the data is evolving, how the customer trends are evolving, how the business is evolving, and what
Yeah.
can you do to better unlock the insights with the data. And that is where thinking out of the box and sort of like trying to
Yeah.
adopt Gen AI or AI technologies is very, very critical.
Have you seen success at the highest levels inside large organizations where leadership enables this sort of change? Google was always famous for that 10% initiative, where 10% of your time was on innovations. And so you didn't have to ask permission. You had the freedom and the space to explore. In that instance where a courageous leader is saying we're going to employ maybe some LLMs towards, say, an e commerce situation. If leaders say, hey, I'm making this up, but every quarter we want you to iterate or explore, innovate one component of your day to day. And then when folks are reaching across the aisles, it's not so much of a strain or an effort, because maybe some of those efforts have been kind of preceded. Have you seen that work well?
Yeah. Um, it's it's all about stepping out of comfort zone and also having an overall awareness of what industry trends are going on. It's about understanding where the business is going and anticipating what you need to keep your growth, upward trend, so to say. And a good leader is somebody who preemptively anticipates that and sort of just goes after that. So setting that kind of like culture within the organization where you're committing to certain percentage of time for innovation or sandboxing or trying out new approaches, that always works in the benefit of like the company, because you are just proactive about it.
Yeah. I love that. We've got time for about two topics left here. So we talked a lot about putting that framework in place. We talked about being that courageous executive, talking about the mindset shifts, loving the process, not necessarily always focused about outcomes, but becoming that AI enabled organization. We talked about reaching across the aisles, building those cross functional teams around those PLCs. That's all great. And then guess what? You hit governance. right? Governance that's put in place to keep us safe, to protect our data. As we know, that's a huge challenge right now, the security. So you've done all of that. And now, as a courageous technology leader, you're running into the governance that's rightfully put in place. How do you overcome some of that? Or when someone says, yes, I agree with that, I need 90 days, right? And then it just kills momentum, or that's not possible. How do you maintain that momentum?
Yeah. So when it comes to generative AI, governance doesn't have to be brakes on your project if you handle it right. So let's break it down into four simple strategies. First is model risk and policies. You want to get ahead of any potential risk. Think of this as setting the guardrails early on. What could go wrong with the model? Could it pick up biases? Is there a chance it will make some hilariously inaccurate predictions? Setting policies around these risks and upfront will save you headaches and some awkward conversations later. It's like having a fire extinguisher in place before things get too heated.
Yeah.
The second thing is performance metrics assessment. So measuring the performance of Gen AI models exactly isn't a walk in a park. LLMs, large language models, don't give you a neat scorecard at the end of the day saying A plus accuracy. So metrics like Blue, which is spelled as BLEU, and Rouge are useful for measuring language generation quality.
Yeah.
And even then, those models can overfit or underperform in surprising ways. So sometimes you just have to bring in the humans, and human in the loop evaluations can give you that extra confidence that your model is doing what it's supposed to do. The third thing is model transparency and explainable AI. Now, I strongly believe transparency is the key. No one wants your to work with a black box. Your stakeholders and probably your legal team wants to know how these decisions are being made. Make sure your model can explain its choices in plain English or at least something close to it. Explainable AI helps make those decisions more understandable, especially for non-technical folks. And trust me, nothing builds trust faster than saying, here is how the model came to that conclusion, instead of shrugging and saying, the AI just knows. And then finally, and this is last but not the most sort of like the most important topic, which is ethical and responsible AI considerations. Always ask yourself how much this model can impact real people, whether it's amplifying bias or unintentionally making the world a little less fair. You need to consider these implications early. This doesn't mean that this will basically keep you out of the headlines, especially the negative ones, and it will make sure that your AI aligns with broader societal values, which is important for the long game.
I think that's really interesting. So I'm imagining as you're doing kind of these very iterative deliverables, and I'm imagining the sprint demos, right? At the end of the week, at the end of the 2 weeks, at the end of the month. What I'm hearing you say is making sure you're not only demoing the app, but for everyone in the room, the technical side and the business side, and especially as we work to become an AI enabled organization, is making sure you're setting aside a portion of that time to talk about the model and talk about the technology and the logic. And for a while, it might be over a lot of 95% of our heads. But if you make that a part of the demo, I think one, it's interesting, but we'll get used to seeing that part of it. We'll get more educated, and then we can ask better questions of the people that are responsible for building the models. Is that fair?
100% fair. I know the dreadful word audit or model risk assessment sort of like just give us like, heebie-jeebies, but it's part of our life, and we should sort of like always consider that when you're shipping out a new model in production, or trying to A/B test something, these are also the aspects that you have to consider to make sure that your model is following the ethics and responsible AI aspect as well. It's very, very, very important.
Amazing. All right, we're right at time. I'm going to get you out of here on this, Shuchi. It's called Turbocharge Tomorrow for a reason. Out of everything we talked about, if you could pull one thing forward that you would potentially recommend that executives do tomorrow, what should they start doing today, this afternoon, as it pertains to becoming an AI-enabled organization?
Um, my message for executives, I would say, like, ultimately, the organizations that succeed with AI aren't the ones that rest on their laurels. They're the ones that are constantly evolving, just like the technology itself. So, in addition to what we have asked, I would say you need to build a team that embraces learning and innovation, and you'll always be ready for what comes next.
Becoming deeply curious. That's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Sushi, thank you so much for joining us today. We covered an enormous amount of ground in 30 short minutes. I wish you the best of luck in your new role starting on Monday, and I can't wait to follow along.
Thank you. And thank you for spending time with us today to all the great audience. I look forward to seeing how you'll break the gridlock and start driving impactful AI initiatives. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Have a great Friday, everyone. Appreciate it.